Follow Moneyball. I'm Michael Connor, marketing guy for New Voodoo Media Services, joined today by Lee Jacobs, our EVP of Marketing Analysis, especially for radio. And he's back from the field with another ratings prospect study. This is the fourth or fifth video in a series going over the data that we've collected from, 3,000-ish respondents nationwide. And today we're going to take a look at live and local versus voice tracked and potentially not local and not live, not alive, and omnipresent. Voice tracking 2.0, how listeners feel about voice bot DJs. Lee, we've gone over the sample composition, I think, enough in prior videos not to do a deep dive, but we will just remind you 14 to 64-year-olds. Right. So we're a little younger than the adults and a little older than the advertising demo. And that's on purpose to have a nice broad spectrum so that we can isolate different demographic cells. And of course, we're balanced nationwide. It's a compensated sample, and the data is fresh from mid to late Q2 2024. And Lee, the important thing here is not everybody in our study is created equal when it comes to contributing to the radio ratings.
Right, because out of 3,188 respondents, when we model through the different things that you'd have to do to participate with Nielsen, either wearing a meter or carrying a diary around with you, when you distill down the people who are most likely to do that and ensure that everybody in their household does it along with them, we drop from 3,188 to 475. So it's 15% of the sample. And then to make it, label those RPS yes, and then to raise the bar a little higher, we looked at the subset of those RPS yes, likely ratings respondents, at just the people who listen to broadcast radio at least an hour a day. There's 159 of them who we will label RPS heavies.
And they're the ones who deliver the quarter hours when it comes to the monthly report card. Okay.
Those are the people who can literally move the meter for you.
So only 3 questions, but lots of breakouts. And rather than overwhelming you with data, I've done a little trickery here to obfuscate the chart so we can kind of focus in on the findings one at a time. We're going to do basically 3 questions. One where we ask people about how they feel about different levels of trickery that radio sometimes performs on its audience. The second, we're going to ask them to forecast listening in certain situations that will become apparent. And then finally, we're going to measure current perception. So let's start with the first batch of breakouts for question number 1. Imagine you're listening to a music station and there's a little bit of talk between songs. How would you feel if the person hosting the show, ... broadcast live from a studio in your area, Lee?
Right. So, in this one, 60%, 66%, 2/3 say they felt good about that. Almost 30% don't care. And that's reflective. We understand that. And 5% say it's bad, presumably because they just don't want anything else beyond the music in that presentation. If you open it up to pretends to be live on the radio, but it's actually pre-recorded at the local station on the day before, we know that is time shifting. And now good drops from 66 to 20%, 45%, bad 34%. Pretty
much bigger negative numbers than national contesting, for example.
Right. And add to the fact that that's something that's done all the time and has been done all the time for probably better than 2 decades.
And PUM is down in those 2 decades.
Fair enough.
Correlation, not necessarily causation.
Right. Pretends to be in a local studio, but it's actually on the other side of the country, boxed in. Now the bad rises up to 42%. Good is held steady at 20%. Whatever, at 38%. But again, this is something that goes on all the time. Simulates being a human host, but it's actually an AI voice bot driven by artificial intelligence. Interestingly, good pops up 2 points to 22%. Don't care, 30%, 48%, nearly half say that's bad. But don't forget, 42% say that, boxed in from the other side of the country is bad, or 34% say time shifting is bad. And
standard business practices now.
Absolutely.
And AI is likely to become one, but we're going to talk about this more from a weakness and offensive opportunity standpoint. Before we do that, let's focus in on the folks who deliver the bacon for radio stations.
Right. The 5% who are the RPS heavies, those who listen to radio at least an hour a day and profile as being among the type of people who are likely to show up within your Nielsen sample. If we specify it as broadcast live from a studio located in your area, almost 4 and 5, 79% say that's good. And again, 5% say that's bad, presumably because, well, they're in the way, perhaps. But then, just to keep it simple, we jump straight to the AI possibility. Simulates being a human host, but it's actually a bot driven by AI. Now, 37% say that's bad, 45% say it's good. So good is up from the overall sample, bad is down, but only down some. 37%, 3 and 8 say that's bad.
So I think this data speaks to, because I think, let's face it, radio's margins are going to continue to shrink, and PUM is probably going to continue to decline, and operators are going to have to come up with creative ways to continue to manage that decline and profit margins that are acceptable.
Right.
And so AI is going to get used. But I think this speaks to the issue of poor execution. And what I would remind people, if they want to go back and look at our research about contests, which was our previous video available at newvoodoo.com/webinars, is that national contesting, that's something pretty much nobody knew about.
Right.
And so when you added that unfamiliarity factor with the rest of the contest playing audience that really had no problem with it, it had a negligible impact. And so I would argue that poor execution is the issue that can make this an exploitable issue from across the street.
Right. Just as it would be for time shifting or for for boxing somebody in from across the country.
Yep.
Those are things that, as long as they're invisible to listeners, as long as they don't realize it's going on, it's not going to be a detriment. But the moment that your host who's doing the show, but actually over on the other side of the country, mispronounces,
Good morning, Worcester.
Right.
I mean, Worcester,
right.
Massachusetts.
As they do that, that's the part that starts to get you in trouble. And that's going to be the potential hurdle as operators integrate AI into their DJ staff.
No question. Program directors are going to be writing content for AIs or whatever limited live staff that they're going to have access to. So things like backselling a cheap trick cut from the album live at Budokan, or I think you had mentioned a couple of 80s artists and hits that.
Well, sure. I mean, it's fair game to decide how AI might pronounce In Excess.
Yep.
And then, frankly, if it's a more current base station, be interesting to see what AI does with SZA.
Or Kajaja Gugu.
Oh, right. Too shy. Right. That would be an interesting backsell. Sure. So,
okay. So that sentiment, let's move on to predictive behavior. We asked about if you find out that voice tracking of songs and giving the weather on a station that you were listening to is actually an AI bot, how would that affect your future listening?
Right.
Lee, we need a disclaimer about listeners' forecasting behavior.
Yeah, we're terrible at that. We're terrible at forecasting behavior in any part of our lives, but it does get to sentiment, and it gets us an idea about if this were completely transparent, if people knew, if they had time to think about it, if they weren't balancing it off against, well, I can listen to this song or that song, or have to turn the thing off and just, suffer in silence, or listen to my tinnitus in the back of my head. There's a lot in that. But nevertheless,
you see the choices on the right, and then let's set a baseline, Lee.
Right. Total sample, 20% clutch their pearls and say, I would tune away and never come back. Another 29% say they'd listen less. So about half the audience theoretically in play with them realizing that, that's not a live human. That's a bot. That's not only a recorded voice, that's one of those AI things. Now, listen, 7% across the entire sample say they'd listen more. And I'll call that close to half, 35% plus 9%. That's 44% or 43%. Did I get that right? Yeah, 44.
Yeah.
Say they're not sure, it wouldn't change anything.
I think we look at the black and blue boxes to determine, kind of watch the black and blue boxes as we progress to determine the potential black and blues that your ratings might come to. Whoops, sorry about that. Whoop, just buried the lead or gave it away.
Yeah, you might as well go back. So now 46% between the black and blue, the bruised section of the chart.
That's a little surprising.
So they're going away. And then if you drill it down to the RPS heavies, the 5% of the sample who are likely to show up within the rating sample and listen to a lot of broadcast radio, now that number drops a little bit further.
Yeah, the positives increase.
43%, and the positives go up a little bit. So it's a matter of that presupposes that it's done well, and maybe there's something interesting about that. Generationally, Mike, it kind of flips around. The Gen Zs, interestingly, well over 50% end up in that black and blue kind of bruised section here. It's a little bit lower among the millennials. And then if we add in the Gen X plus, as it's labeled here, because this is Gen X plus 5 years, the 5 youngest years of the baby boom, now it wafts back up to about half. 48% say that they would listen less or tune away and never ever come back. And as a gift, we've got the RPS CHR plus hot AC constituents here, and we've got this broken up by, I think it's 10 other format constituencies in the data, but we'll show this one to you here. If you'd like to see all of them, hit us up at tellmemore@newvoodoo.com. We'd be glad to show you all of the data within RPS 24.
Yeah, and that's whether you're a New Voodoo client or not.
Correct.
All right. So now let's deal with current perceptions. Now that we've dealt with forecast behavior and feelings, let's get to what's the state of play today. So this is an agree or disagree question. Most of the DJs on radio stations are computer-generated AI voices.
Right. Well, overall, it's 23%, a little less than a quarter, are suspicious that, that's what they're doing. They're not humans anymore. Okay. Among the ratings likelies, it goes up a little bit. Among the heavy listening ratings likelies, it goes down, perhaps because these are the people who really hear enough radio that it's like, those are real people. They spend at least an hour a day with broadcast radio. So they're a little bit less suspicious that there's a lot of this AI thing going on. Then generationally, the Gen Zs, 3 and 8, oh my God, it's coming in. About a quarter of the millennials, and the Gen X pluses, the Gen X and a few baby boomers, it's down to 16%. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I
imagine top 40 is a little like the Gen Zers.
It's kind of between millennials and Gen X, actually. 19%. Not that many, really. Yeah.
And of course, top 40 audience is a very broad demo.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I actually look at this again through the lens of, I think it's less about using pleasant voices to do shifts where the music is the star, whether they're biological entities or machine-based. I think the issue is more about don't bullshit people.
Right. I agree with that. And there's the example of that Alpha at its CHR station in Portland announced that they were jumping in early a couple of years ago, and they had put AI Ashley, very nice woman, Ashley Elzinga, and her voice was, profiled or whatever they call that to make it AI-able, but their PD was actually typing out everything that AI Ashley said. And now these days, a couple of years later, I guess it became apparent that there wasn't enough novelty in AI Ashley. So now Ashley Z does the midday show there, and AI Ashley apparently is just used when she needs a vacation. Rather,
it's sort of like Visit Our Website, which was a very novel in 1997. It became kind of trite and no longer a wedge you could use as a marketing differentiator by the early 2000s.
Right.
And so here we're in an era where we're going to be using AI bots for cost saving, and I think that's okay. There is negative baggage on it if you do it poorly. And as somebody who used to, there were several videos, particularly for the packaged goods industry where we were not known, where I used AI bots to do the narration of our research for other industries. And now, obviously, this technology that I'm referring to, it was 2 years ago.
Sure.
But it was really hard work between pronunciation and trying to write to the strength of the particulars bot's underlying algorithms. Expressiveness varied. And so I would argue that there was very little time saving.
Right.
And for the limited staff who's already got 1 million jobs, taxing them with great writing that's not going to be an easy, that's not an automatic hole in one.
Right. I would agree with that. Plus, I will argue as the day is long that from the listener perspective, there's less need in 2024 for people who frankly had, the wonderful pear-shaped tones that were fashionable when you and I started out in the business. Just humans who express themselves in an interesting manner and can do the things you need them to do might just be a lot easier, despite the complications of managing humans compared to AI for some instances. That said, it's absolutely going to happen. It's going to be necessary to extend radio years into the future. Plus, to be completely honest, to keep the thing on 24/7, 168 hours a week. But the kind of detail that we've gotten into just in this video, looking at RPS 24, we can get under the hood and find out what's the state of perception in your market with one of our ASAP studies. It's a tactical perceptual with a shorter interview, a slightly smaller sample, but we can turn one of those around usually in less than a month and for under $10,000, which gets us an awful lot of information for not too much money. And I will say, as the day is long, that data-driven decisions are almost inevitably better decisions than those that we make strictly on gut.
And I would make a suggestion for those of you up against a Goliath who's offering $1,000 an hour through national contesting and putting marketing behind it, and you feel overwhelmed locally. There's probably a good chance they're doing an AI shift just horribly. And one way you need to validate this by doing an ASAP study in your market to make sure it's an issue that's worth the media tonnage you might put against it. But the idea would be to hang AI on that business that radio fakes giveaways and doesn't really give the prizes away, gives them to their friends and or gives them to themselves and doesn't really hand out the cash. That's where I think you can go after robots on the radio.
There you go.
All right. So Lee, if somebody wants to get that consultation prior to the next big rating sweep or to see the data.
Yep, absolutely. Hit us up at tellmeMore@newvoodoo.com. We'll get you on the schedule and would be delighted to talk to you. We like talking to radio. Do it all day.
You can see the entire set of data with more still to come at our website. RPS 24 modules are published about once a week. And if you're on social media, please leave us a comment and let us know about how you might be using or how badly your competitor is using AI. If you want to name names, that's up to you, but we'll take anonymous input because we'd love to hear how the industry is being creative. And that's at newvoodoo.com/webinars if you don't see us on social. So I think that's it for us. Let's cue the AI voice.
New Voodoo builds digital products and conducts research and marketing campaigns for clients.
It's easy to get in touch. Drop us a line at tellmemore@newvoodoo.com.